Hi, this is Luke Edwards for Acoustic Guitar Magazine, and in this video I'm going to walk you through a traditional Welsh reel called Neath the Cuckoo, or the Cuckoo's Nest. We'll explore some of the techniques and ornamentation that give traditional tunes their character, like cuts, taps, slides and rolls. Then I'll walk you through the piece and how to apply those ornaments to bring it to life. Okay, so to play this piece we're going to tune our guitar into drop D tuning. So that's really similar to standard tuning with one difference, which is that we're going to take our 6th string, or our sort of thick E string, and we're going to tune it down to a D note. So it's going down one full step until it sounds like this. And you can kind of match it then with your other D string, kind of check them in tune. So the reason we're doing this is that the piece that we're going to be playing is in D Dorian mode, which means there's a lot of D minor chords, and then this gives us access to a whole extra octave lower with our D for our root note, and it also lets us set up a nice sort of alternating bass pattern with our thumb, so you can kind of cycle your thumb between the two D strings. This is a really common tuning that you'll find in loads of these sort of arrangements, and it just works really nicely on the guitar. So once you're in the drop D tuning, we'll take a look at our first example, which is our first ornament, the cut. So a cut is a really brief grace note, and sort of in terms of the guitar, you can kind of think of it as a pull-off. So you're going to play a note that's higher than your principal note, the note you sort of maybe your melody note or your sort of main note, and you're going to instantly pull off to that note. So unlike where you might sort of normally see pull-offs, this doesn't have its own value. This is sort of extra to the bar. It's almost instant, and you just sort of fitting it in the phrasing. So you'll notice in the example one that the first of each pair of notes is sort of italicized, and if you look at the notation, it's sort of got a little strike through it. So this is just telling us that it's a grace note and it's not got any sort of formal value in the bar. It's just a really quick little effect that you use to sort of add some character to your phrasing. So our first one, we have an A sharp, so fret 6, and we've got an A as our principal note. Because these are so quick, we're going to need to fret our sort of second note, our principal note first, in preparation so that as soon as we've played our sort of grace note, our cut, we can instantly pull off to it. So this is the first one, so you've got 6 to 5. So you play the 6, and then instantly, don't let it hang around, you just pull off to your 5. And then same thing with the 5 to 3, so that's an A to a G note. So you can use your ring finger for this and use your first finger on the G. And then our next one, we have a G to an F, so it's 3 to 1, so same fingers. So ring finger, and then our last one is an F to an E, so it's just pulling off to the open string. Example 2 is a tap, so it's sort of the counterpart to the cut. So if a cut is pulling off from a higher note, a tap is sort of hammering onto a higher note from a lower note. So same thing, you're going to play an E note, and we're going to hammer onto an F. So it's sort of instant again, you play, and then instantly move to your principal note. Next one, you've got F to G, so sort of the opposite of what we did in the previous example. So you're going to go, then we have a G to an A, and then last one we have A to an A sharp. It doesn't always have to be the next scale note up like these ones are. So with sort of example 1 and 2, we've had sort of the next available note in the scale that we've gone from. So we've gone from the 6 down to the 5. You can go from a higher note, or you can hammer on for the tap. So there's loads of room to experiment. It's sort of more the phrasing aspect of it is sort of adding these grace notes in. So a nice exercise to kind of warm up, I guess, and sort of practice different versions of these is if we set up that nice groove that we had earlier with the thumb, and then just have a little play about on the bottom string. So just improvise a little bit and just get used to doing those quick grace notes. So yeah, those are probably some of the more common ornaments that you'll see in this sort of style of music. Example 3 is another common one. This is the slide. So you might be familiar with the slide. It's just a method of getting from one note to another. So in this example, we've got this A note, and we're sliding it from the 2 all the way up to the 7. So you apply pressure to your initial note, and then you're going to move your finger to the destination while keeping the pressure down. The sort of larger the distance you cover, it can be tricky to accurately stop in the right place. You might find you overshoot or undershoot. That can take a little bit of work. The second one we have is this 10 down to the 9. So that's a little bit easier because you're just travelling the 1 fret. But yeah, they can make things sound sort of silky and sort of fluid. You could incorporate it into that thing we just looked at with the grace notes. So just have a play about with it. But yeah, sort of 3 very common ornaments. So 4 is a little bit more interesting. So this is our roll. So a roll is sort of a principal note, and then you've got a bunch of sort of sequential grace notes. So we're going to go to a scale note higher than the principal note, then return to the principal note, a note below, and then back. So you've got 5 notes in total. So in the example, we have sort of one of the bars from the piece, and instead of what we have written on the sheet music, so this is kind of the existing version, you would replace with this roll. So you've got, that is principal note, and then a tap onto the next note up, pull off, move down, hammer on. So it can sound really sort of like fluid. So you got, have a play about with those, but yeah, that's an interesting one, the roll. And then in the second bar of that example, you can see a little sort of sideways S sort of marking on above the notation. That's the shorthand for a roll. So if you sort of notate it out explicitly like we have in the first bar, it takes up a lot of room. Whereas if you kind of learn that technique, you can use the shorthand symbol to make it a bit easier. So yeah, example 4. And then example 5 is another really similar one. It's called a mordent. So it's kind of like a shorter version of a roll. So it's just going to be sort of a tap and a cut really quickly from the principal note. So in that first bar of example 5, we've got one of the bars from the piece, but sort of using a mordent instead of what's written. So we've got, and then in the next bar of that, we have the symbol, which is sort of like this zigzag, which is our shorthand for the mordent. So you can kind of put those together. Just as a different variation to replace some of the bars. This can help make it feel sort of more alive, but also it lets you get a bit of longevity out of the piece because they tend to be quite short. You'll have sort of 2 sections of sort of 8 bars maybe. You can get a bit more mileage by replaying a section and just sort of sprinkling in a couple of these ornaments. So yeah, that is example 5. So example 6 is a technique called Campanella, which means little bell in Italian, and it sort of lets you evoke a harp-like sound or sort of like a sustained pedal piano sound. So in the sort of first bar of example 6, we have just a regular C major scale. And for virtually all of those notes, to get to the next note, we're sort of letting go of the previous note and it sort of cuts out. Another way to play it is to select, where possible, consecutive notes on different strings so that you can leave the previous one ringing while you play the new one. So instead of going, you can go. So this is the second bar of example 6. You've got there's loads of ways to play them. If you sort of are interested, if you have a look at sort of harp scales or Campanella scales, there's lots of sort of resources online, but you can kind of figure them out yourself. You're just hunting for creative ways to play the next note in a sort of scale sequence, but trying to not kill off your previous one. So that second one I played there was a G scale, but instead of going to the F sharp there, I went to it on the B string. So you hear a lot of that in the piece coming up. But yeah, that is Campanella. And then our final example is to do with natural harmonics. So this is a really cool sort of guitaristic technique, and it kind of evokes a bit of a harp sound. So if you're not familiar with harmonics, they're not too difficult to pull off at certain frets. They get more difficult at sort of other frets, but sort of our easiest place to do them is our 12th fret. So if we start there, what you're going to do is, in the same way that you'd sort of try and mute a string if you're stopping them from playing, if you do that at certain points on the guitar, instead of muting, you get this really beautiful sort of resonant bell-like tone instead. So the 12th fret is our halfway point on our string length, and we've got a really nice one there that's sort of the easiest to get. So if you take the tip of one of your fingers and you fret very gently, just touch the string above the fret wire. So our 12th fret is actually the fret that's to the right of the dot, if you ever mark a dot there, like I do. And you're going to touch the string and then play it. And if you get it sort of gently enough in the right place, you'll get this nice sort of bell-like tone. So that's one option at the 12. If it doesn't quite ring out, it's usually one of two things. So it's either that you're not quite over the fret wire, so we're aiming for perfectly in line with the metal fret wire itself, or you're not gentle enough, or the harmonic sort of sings a bit better with a sort of treblier frequency. So if you pick a little bit closer to your bridge, it'll stand out a bit better than if you did it near the neck. Not so necessary for the 12th fret, because that's quite an easy one to get. But as we move to the other ones, so you've got one at the 7th fret. You might have to play a bit closer to the bridge, and then we got one at the 5th fret. So that one's a bit harder again. And then you've got a couple of weird ones. You got the 4th fret, and you've also got the 9th fret, which is the same. But there's some cool things. Some cool sort of moments you can get out of those harmonics. So in example 7, I've got the tune Amazing Grace sort of notated out in harmonics. So I'm going to try and play that. So that is a combination of the three we just looked at. So you've got the 5s, which is your hardest one. So maybe get that with your first finger and as precise as you can over that fret wire. And then probably we're going to shift position up to get the 7 and 12s with one sort of grip. So you'd probably leave the 5th fret and then get the 7 with your first finger, picking closely to the bridge. And then 7 and 12 with our first finger and little finger. So you can kind of almost hover a bar over the 7 there. And then the 12 with a little finger. 7, 12. And yeah, that's just sort of one example of a tune that you can kind of form in harmonics. Sometimes if you're lucky, you can get sort of an extended phrase of the tune out in harmonics, which can be a really nice arrangement technique, a nice moment in the song. Sometimes you can just get a few of them and you might have to sort of supplement it with sort of fretted notes. There are bypasses if you're just missing the one note. You can actually get these 12 frets above any fretted note. So if you were missing one, let's say you had a 2nd fret, so you had this F sharp you needed, but we don't have a harmonic for that. What you can do is, in the same way that these harmonics work with a capo on. So if you had a capo on fret 2, you could do these at fret 14. You can also fret them and then get the harmonic at 12 frets above that. So that can lend itself to some cool techniques where you can kind of fret these harmonics. But yeah, none of those in the piece. It's just some of these open harmonics. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the piece Neath the Cuckoo. So I'll walk you through the different sections of it and sort of where we can apply these different ornaments. So the piece is in 4/4, and we're still in our drop D tuning. And there's two sort of melodic sections. You have an A section and a B section, and we have sort of a repeat of the A section. So we have sort of AA and then a B, and then after that B, we're going back to the A section, but we're dropping down an octave. So we're sort of doing a lower version of that first idea. So the piece begins with a slide. So that was our example 3, the 2 to 7. So you've got this. So I would start that with your ring finger, so that when you land up in this sort of D minor triad, you've got your middle and your first finger sort of available to get the melody notes. So I'm going to play the pickup bar, which is the slide, into bar 1. So you've got got this little diagonal shape, and then our little finger getting this high D up here. And whilst doing all of that, we've got this really strong alternating bass groove. Great, moving on to bar 2, we've got sort of just like a D5 sort of sound. And we got our first cut, so that is from example 1 to a little sort of G shape. So it would be like a normal G chord, but because we're in drop D, we've had to move this up 2 frets. So G is now our 5th fret. So those 2 bars. And then bar 3 is very similar to bar 1. So it starts out with that D minor sort of. And then we got our first example of Campanella. So everything sort of sustains into each other there. So you've got. A C chord, so a little bit of a stretch. You've got first finger on our C in the bass, so it would have been an 8th fret. Again, we're in drop D, so it's a 10. And then our middle finger is going to get the other C note there, the other 10. And then your little finger is going to get the other C note up there, which is your 13. You got. So that is the first half of the A section, so I'll play it all together. Moving on to the second line. So starts out very similar, just minus the slide. So you've got this sort of D minor again. Back to this 5 with the cut. G chord. And then we're sort of rounding off the first A section. And then an A. And then it's up to you after sort of that 8th bar. It's going to repeat back to the first sort of full bar. You can either play it the same way again, or in the sort of demonstration I've added in some of the ornaments. So I think it was example 4, the roll is sort of an alternative version of that first bar that you can play. So instead of going to the, you can go just to sort of spice it up a bit. So coming in from the previous bar. Could add a mordent in the next one. So that's bars 1 and 2 with a roll and a mordent. And then you can continue with that if you like. sound a bit sort of slicker. Could add a nice natural harmonic there, so that was bar 4, the open A string, replaced with a harmonic on the 12th fret. And then so that is bar 6 we've just reached, and now we're going to go to the second time bar, so that's bar 9. So this is kind of like almost our turnaround. So we have and then we've got this nice little cadence. So to play that, you're going to do first and third finger on the 5 and 6, and this is kind of an example of Campanella. And then the 7 8 you're going to probably get with your ring finger on the 8 and your middle finger on the 7 to get that B flat sound. Again, some Campanella, so you've got, and then we have that nice cadence again, so you've got A sus4, and then that concludes our very first A section. So following that, we're going up to our B section. So D minor sound there, so you can either bar it or you can just use a pair of fingers. And then we've got our first, we've got our first cut of the B section. And then bar 12, got sort of an A minor sound. So you can partially bar the 5th fret if you like, so that's the bottom 4 strings 5th fret, to get you that's the A minor sound, and then your little finger and ring finger will get the 8 and 7. Added a little cut there. You can kind of add them in wherever you feel. Bar 13, back up to D. Climbing all the way up to 17, and then we've got some natural harmonics, so you're going to get the 15 with your little finger, and you're going to do a little bar on the 12th fret to get those harmonics. Alternatively, you can just fret it, but you get a slightly different sound with the harmonics, and then a little cut. So, and then back to sort of almost the same bit as the start of the B section. Our ending of this first B section, so we've got, and then our cadence. So just moving back to that bit there, bar 17, so you're going to do first 2 fingers to get this sort of D shape, first and middle to get the 5 and 6, which leaves your little finger to get the 8. You can do first and second, sort of a prime candidate to add in some ornaments. And then we have, just like we had sort of at the end of the A section. So following this, we're dropping down to kind of the second half of the piece. So this is going to be the A section again, but down an octave. So I like to strum these with my thumb just to get a different sort of texture. At this point we've lost the alternating bass for a little while, so just to get a different sort of vibe. I like to strum. So yeah, this is bar 19. So you've got a little strum with your thumb, and then just first and second fingers. On top, another strum, a cut, and then next page, similar thing. So you got a strum with some hammer-ons, and we've got a C, and then a little cadence like we had with the A's. So So that's just a C, and we're going to make it a C sus4 by adding on our little finger onto this F note. Now we're on 23, so you've got same as we had at the start of this A section, and then to round it out, bar 25, we've got so that has a little slide there in 26. You've got, and actually this is a slightly different slide, so we've not sort of specified our starting note, so this is just a slide in from below, which means you can go from anywhere below 7, so maybe 6 or lower if you like. And then we're into our final B section. So we start out with so at this point we're kind of bringing back our alternating bass figure. It's just a little bit different. So we've got a harmonic on the 12th, so you can bar that maybe with your middle finger, open E, and then we've got a little slide, and then a little pair of notes. So kind of tucked beneath that we have this as our sort of alternating bass. So that was 31. I'm going to play with the phrasing a bit there. A little bit of Campanella in 32. So this is sort of an A minor sound. So you got, so I like middle finger because it frees up my first and pinky to get the 2 and 5, and then middle. So you've got then after that we have harmonic again, so very similar to begin with, but we're climbing up now. So to get that we're going to bar the 12s, open E, and you do first finger on the 10, ring finger to get that harmonic or just fret it, and then the 10 and 7 is going to be your first and pinky, and then your first finger can just reach up to get that final harmonic. So we've got, and then this is bar 30, so you've got kind of a G shape, so you can do a little partial bar if you like on the 3rd fret for the bottom 2 strings, then your middle finger on the 4 and your ring finger on the 5 in the bass, and then your little finger can get us that sus4 harmony. That was 30. 31 is similar to the start of that B section, so you've got, and then 32 is the same with the next bar, so you've got that. And now we're on the final line of the piece, and this is kind of our sort of ending turnaround. So you've got, so that was 33 and 34, so those 3 notes, then your first, and then middle and ring for the pair of 3s, bit of Campanella with the open D, bar the 5th fret, and ring finger on the 7, and then little finger to ring finger. And then this is 34, so you've got 12 with your ring finger, 11 with your middle, and then 12. And then just to finish the piece, you'll see in the notation it says writ, so that just means we're going to gradually slow down towards the end. We've got kind of that same little phrase we just played, but sort of rephrased with harmonics. So you've got, I'll play that again, so you're going to do probably middle for those 2 12s, or maybe a ring finger, then first finger on the 7, then first finger on the 10, ring finger on the 12th harmonic, and then you're going to do a little first to middle, hammer on pull off, ring finger gets that 12, final little chords. So you've got 10 with your middle, 9 with your index, and then 12 with your pinky. Replace your pinky on 12 with your ring on 11, and then end with the D minor, so just a little partial bar. And then if you want, you could do a Okay, that concludes our lesson. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning the piece and that you found it interesting. And feel free to take any of the techniques and ornaments that we've discussed here today and apply them to your own playing. Adding ornaments in is a really great way to add sort of variety to your melodies, add a lot of character to them. And yeah, thanks for listening, and hopefully see you next time.